Cemetery Ridge is immediately to your front over here at the horizon. All right, and if you follow Cemetery Ridge with your eyes to the right, down past the Red Barn, beyond that, then you'll see two hills down here. The larger hill to the right is Big Round Top, and the one just to the left of that is Little Round Top. And another feature to point out to you is if you see a car going back and forth out there, hopefully there'll be one soon, it'll be traveling right on the Gettysburg Road. Right there's one to your left right there. See that? That car is traveling on the Gettysburg Road. Why do I point it out? Well, the Gettysburg Road is a good line of demarcation between the two armies now as they begin to square off on that second day. On the other side of the Gettysburg Road out there is Yankee territory. And on this side of the Gettysburg Road is all Southern territory in this area right here. If you follow Cemetery Ridge with your eyes to the right, down around the vicinity where that red barn is, see how Cemetery Ridge dips down behind a ridge that's closer to us and conceals from your view what's behind that barn and down in that little valley. Lee needed to know that. It was important for him to know how far to the right is his opponent, this guy here, George Meade, building up and setting up his defensive lines. So at dawn on that second day, Lee will dispatch several of his personal scouts. He still doesn't have his cavalry, so he's sending his scouts out through these fields to probe the enemy lines. One of those scouting parties gets all the way over to the top of Big Round Top over there. From that vantage point over there, that scouting party observes two critically important things. One, no enemy soldiers can be seen occupying Big or Little Round Top. And two, no enemy soldiers can even be seen around the vicinity of Big or Little Round Top. The scouting party mounts up, gallops back, and reports that information to Lee. Lee then says, if I'm being told that that part of the battlefield is empty of the enemy, then the furthest extent that my opponent must be building up and setting up his defensive lines may only lie no further to the right or to the south than behind the vicinity of where that red barn is. So Lee being Lee then, isn't going to send his men through these fields to hit the enemy where they are. Lee being Lee is going to send 14,000 of his men that way and use the ridge back there and the woods back there to conceal the assault forces march to the south, to the right. And when they reach the Gettysburg Road in the vicinity of Big Round Top, they will form their battle formations and launch a mammoth attack up the valley, crashing into, overwhelming, and outflanking the vulnerable left flank of the Union Army, where Lee believes it is, stationed behind that red barn out there. Unfortunately for the Confederates, it will take them almost all day, until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, to finally get into position to launch this attack. In the process, then, they have wasted most of the day, and they will only have between 3 and 4 hours of daylight left to fight this battle. The smoothbore guns fired their traditional cannonball, a 12-pound cannonball. They had a range of about a mile, so you could hit enemy targets over there with something like this. Here's where your fuse went in over here, at the top. But I have this one cut in half. Inside of here were stuffed musket balls, in addition to your bursting charge right in here. So as this shell is fired and the fuse starts to burn and burns down and blows the shell apart, it sprays not a dozen pieces of metal in all directions, but maybe 30 or 40 pieces of metal go flying out in all directions. The brainchild of this device here was not an American. It was a British Army general who, right after our War of Independence, came up with the idea to stuff musket balls inside of these cannonballs. And his name lives down to us today. His name was General Henry Shrapnel. This tree right here is a witness tree. It's another tree that was here at the time of the battle. It's about a 200-year-old walnut tree. And then off to your left there, running parallel with the wooden fence right out there, you see some humped up sod with some weeds on top of it. Those are the traces of original Union Army earthworks built by Union soldiers trying to dig in and protect themselves. This is Cemetery Ridge. This is the heart of the Union line right here. And this is where Lee had hoped his troops would fight to on that afternoon of the second day to overpower the Union forces in this area. And they almost got here, but not quite. That's Lee's statue over there, directly opposite us on Cemetery Ridge. And what we can't see, but Lee did, because Lee was an extremely precise judge of terrain. Out there, if you actually ever have the opportunity to walk from over there to over here, there are actually 2 deep gullies out there within which you could get into and avoid enemy fire for just a moment to catch your breather, reorganize, and push on to your next objective. So Lee saw that also as an opportunity for his men to have some cover as they advance through the fields over here in front of you. At 1 o'clock on the afternoon of the 3rd day of this battle, the Confederate bombardment begins. We estimate about 147 Confederate cannon over there roaring into action, shelling this area with ferocity. It was said that Confederate shells screamed into this area here at the rate of 6 a second, which is faster than you, young man, can blink your eyes at that. Try it. So imagine the confusion and chaos as these shells begin raining down, exploding all around us, blowing up some ammunition just behind you, killing horses, killing men up here as well. The infantry up there, the Union infantry, hits the dirt behind the rock wall defenses. But the Union artillery are ordered to stand by their guns and begin firing back, adding about 80 more cannon to the cacophony of this bombardment. For a total of 227 cannon roaring in this little valley here. And it was, and still is, the largest artillery bombardment in the Western Hemisphere occurred on that summer afternoon 148 years ago, last week. Exactly last week. The noise was so loud it was said it could be heard all the way to Philadelphia, which is 100 miles that way, and almost to Pittsburgh, 150 miles that way out there. After about an hour and a half of tremendous pounding, the Confederates figured they had dealt out enough punishment. It's time now to cease the bombardment and send in the infantry and finish off the enemy as fast as possible. So between the hours of 2:30 and 3 o'clock, the orders were given to pass down the line, bombardment to cease, and as the bombardment explodes to a halt, a very ominous silence descends across this battlefield, mostly because everyone was deaf. But and as the smoke begins to blow off this little hill here, the Union soldiers up here in front of you, behind the rock wall defenses, as they lift their heads and peek across the tops of the walls out there, what they see out there is a magnificent sight. They see 12,000 Confederate soldiers emerge from the wood line out there, and they begin marching slowly and silently towards us. Another Union soldier said it looked like a river of silver as the Confederates stepped out of the shadows of the trees over there, and the sunlight began to glint off their rifle barrels and bayonets. Now, while the infantry up there was waiting to do their job and just sitting down and waiting, the Union artillery up here, they had an entirely different perspective and a job. And their job was to destroy that attack before it even got over here. And those 80 Union cannon roar back into action now, ripping great gaps and holes in the Confederate line as it surges towards us. The Confederates keep coming, and they reach the Emmitsburg Road where that red car is right now and begin bolting over the wooden fences out there. Every Union soldier up here holding a rifle have been ordered, hold your fire until the enemy reaches the road out there. And between 5,000 and 6,000 rifles open fire on those Confederate soldiers out there. And a Union eyewitness said that the moment the Union riflemen opened fire on those Confederate soldiers across that wooden fence, he said dozens, if not hundreds, of Confederate soldiers just tumbled off the top rails of those fences out there as if a giant knife was going along, skimming along the top rail of the fences. One Confederate soldier out there said it sounded like hail hitting the fences from all the bullets coming at them. The Confederates make it though, those to the left, and they jump on this side of the wooden fence, and now they're running up towards us, firing the rifles and going as they come. They'll run right up to the rock wall up here, and heavy hand-to-hand fighting occurs between the two opposing sides as they bash and stab and club each other. And if you look at that statue right there, the fellow swinging his rifle like a club. He's not playing golf. It's because he now does not have time to load his rifle anymore. He's now using it as a club. I tried to remind people on that summer afternoon the fate of two nations really hung in the balance between those opposing struggling masses over there in front of you. Between 300 and 500 Confederate soldiers pour over the rock wall behind him, surging up into this area here. But that's on the front line of the Yankee defenses. Behind you are 1,500 Pennsylvanians, New Yorkers, Massachusetts soldiers. That's the second line of defense in order to stand, level the rifle, and fire and then charge. And that's exactly what they do. They stand up and deliver a murderous volley into the oncoming packed masses of Confederates as they are running up towards us, spilling many to the ground. Lee is watching this entire spectacle unfold over there where his statue is today. Over there on that third day of July, he was observed sitting on a log, holding the reins of his horse. This is Gray's last gamble up here in Pennsylvania. Lee's to pull it off. He sees this magnificent line of men sweep forward, almost irresistibly disappear into the smoke over here, and he sees the attack collapse in the church. At that point, Lee's heart must have sunk to his stomach, realizing I've lost this battle. Now time to try and get my men out of Pennsylvania, back over that mountain range, back to Virginia, without getting trapped up here and annihilated. Of the over 12,000 Confederate soldiers that left the woods over there to begin this attack, fully 60% will not return to the safety of Confederate lines over there. It's a massive loss. Right after the battle, just on the other side of the rock wall over there, was dug a trench. Into it were dumped the bodies of almost 700 Confederate soldiers killed in front of the Union lines up here. The Battle of Gettysburg is now over. Lee is now pulling his men back out of Gettysburg, back over the mountain range. He's lost 30% of his army up here in the field of Gettysburg. One of the very sobering aspects of Lee's retreat is the wagon train that holds Lee's wounded as he's trying to evacuate Gettysburg. It's 17 miles long as it snakes over the mountain range back there. This was not an easy fight for the North either. They lost 25% of their effectives as well on this field. And it's going to take General Meade 2 days to recover, to resupply his men with food and ammunition, and get them ready to pursue Robert E. Lee. In the meantime, Lee is long gone, and he beats Meade back to Virginia, and the war continues for 2 more very, very bloody years. In fact, many of the soldiers that survived the carnage here at Gettysburg will not live to see the end of the war. The fighting is that bitter in 1864 and 1865 until the South is finally cornered and forced to surrender at Appomattox in April of 1865.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.